This tutorial will demonstrate how to create this infinite marble device in Blender 3. Let's start with the glass spiral. Add a Archimedean curve from Curve Spirals. If you don't see the properties, press F9. Set the turns to 2 and adjust the height and radius of the spiral to your liking. The growth will determine the top expansion of the spiral. I will adjust it so it won't be too large. It will make the marble go down faster, while looking like the marble speeds up. You can fine-tune the values with shift and drag. Great, I like how this looks. We can continue to the next step. Press Tab to go to Edit Mode, and select the top point. Now press Numpad 7 to go to Top View. Now I want to add a segment to the spiral, so it will start at the center. With top point selected, press E to extrude the point. I will create a rough line with sharp corners first. Use the 3D cursor as the center mark. Now select all the new points you've created. Right-click and select Subdivide to add additional points. Right-click again and select Smooth. Now to repeat the last operation, press Ctrl+ or a few times, until you are happy with the result. Select the first point again, press E to extrude and Z to move it vertically. Now select the 3 points that make the corner, and smooth them a few times as well. Go to the bottom of the spiral, press 3 on keypad for side view. Select the last point. Repeat the extrude process again to create the part that will be the exit point of the spiral. Make sure the last point is in the general direction of the first point. Select all new points, subdivide, and smooth them a few times. Now let's add a marble. Add a new UV sphere and resize it to 13 mm. You can now see how it looks with marble dimensions. Let's resize the spiral to visually match the marble. We are going to use Blender Physics Engine. For that to work correctly, we have to apply the scale and set the origin point on all objects involved. Let's switch to Object Data Properties, duplicate the spiral as backup, and hide the original. Under Bevel, with Round selected, set the depth of the glass tube. Move the ball to the top point to see how it'll fit in the tube. Shade smooth the marble. And go to Top View with Numpad 7. Now adjust the depth to be larger than the marble. Set the resolution to 1, it'll be easier to adjust, and we will subdivide it later for a smooth look. Right-click and convert the spiral to mesh. Go to Modifiers and add a Solidify modifier. Adjust the thickness and set the offset to 1. Now subdivide with level 3 to smooth out the spiral. Next, go to Physics Properties and add a rigid body. Set the type to passive and shape to mesh. I'll reduce the friction to 0.2 and the sensitivity margin to 0.001. This will make the spiral static but still part of the simulation. Now, select the marble, type will be active, change the mass to 0.2, and the shape to sphere, same settings for the friction and margin as before. Move the marble higher for the catching tray to be added. I'll add a cylinder. Resize it a bit, tab for edit mode, select only the top face and separate it, delete the original object. Resize it in top view to the dimensions you like and move it above the spiral, where it'll catch the marble. Go to edit mode and select the face, press I to inset the face, first the outer wall, and again for the inner inclines, then create an inner hole a bit larger than the marble. Delete the last face. Now Alt-left click on the inner faces loop, to select it. Using Ctrl+ on numpad you can select the next loops, select all the faces before the last loop. Move them down on the Z-axis, with Ctrl on numpad deselect the last loop, and move them a little lower to create an incline, repeat until the last one. Press 2 to go to edge select mode and select the most inner edge, move it down to create an edge that will guide the marble to the spiral tube. Adjust the depth of the catcher as you like. Now add a solidify modifier. And shade smooth. Next a subdivision modifier to smooth out the catcher, let's add a bevel as well to create smooth edges. And move it under solidify so it is applied after. In edit mode, I'll disable the preview for the subdivision so I can see the faces better, and I will extrude the outer loop on Z-axis. Now let's set the physics for the catcher, same as the settings for the spiral. We can now run a simulation test, enable the X-ray mode to see the marble, and move it to the side. Looks good, the marble rolls on the catcher and fits inside the spiral as expected. I like that it has to fit snugly in the hole, it slows it down a bit, so the starting speed is controlled. Let's adjust the top of the spiral. Since we used a very simple geometry it's easy to modify. Let's select the top edge, rotate it a bit and move higher inside. It doesn't have to be perfect, this part will not be visible. Adjust the hole size to fit the marble. Run the simulation a few times to see that everything works. I'll make some final cosmetic changes on the edge. And test another position for the marble starting point. Great, we can continue. Let's add a force that will speed up the marble. I will use the plane shape, it will add a force on z-axis. Change the direction to minus and shape to tube. In the radial settings, adjust the max distance of the force and rotate it to fit the spiral tube. We will add a force on the bottom part of the spiral, so it looks like the spiral sped up the marble at the bottom. Adjust the value to be a bit larger than the tube and position it in the center. The min value is not important in this case. Now let's add a force strength. I'll start with 1000 and test to see how much speed the marble gets. That's not enough, let's try 5000. Better, but it's not reaching the catcher, let's keep adding. This time it was enough, but the marble speed changes each time it goes down, and we can go even higher for a more constant result. But first I want to move the out hole of the spiral to change the trajectory. There we go, a full cycle with perfect landing each time. I can keep playing with the force for different results, but I can see that the 900 frames are filled and all works as expected. Let's bake the final simulation. Go to Scene Properties. Notice the settings I used, 0.5 for the speed, 20 for solver and substeps. You can click Bake now to save the simulation. Great, now to complete the device, let's add some legs and a base. For the legs I'll borrow a point from the catcher mesh. Select a point, duplicate it, and separate selection. Now the point is a new object. Let's delete all the modifiers it has and start fresh. In edit mode, I'll extrude it on Z-axis and move it down. Then convert it to curve. Now go to curve settings and add depth. In top view with X-ray mode on, select the new leg and move it between the spiral edges. Set the resolution to 1 and check the fill caps on. Now you can convert it back to a mesh. In top view, press Alt plus D to create an instance, move it right between the spiral edges. Repeat Alt plus D twice to put two more instances will inherit the changes to the first one, so you'll need to modify only once and it'll apply to all four. Check that the legs don't intersect with the spiral. Let's add a cylinder that we'll use for the base. Resize it to cover most of the spiral. And resize on the Z-axis to fit the height you want. Move it just under the spiral. Add bevel and subdivision modifiers. Shade smooth and add some loops, adjust faces to create a basic shape. Check the legs don't stick out, and adjust any that do. Add a subdivision to the first leg you created. All the instances will auto-copy the setting. Now I'll add an HDRI. I use the free Add an Easy HDRI. Select the folder with your files, go to Preview mode and enable Scene World. You can loop through them to select the one you want. I'll unhide the floor object I created earlier to be used as a table. It's a plane with a wood material. This one will work. Notice the reflections on the table. You want to find a position that will show about half of them. Let's add a camera. Press Ctrl plus Alt plus 0 to set the camera position to view. Press Shift plus tilde to move the camera with WASD keys. Find a shot that will show the device at the starting position. Now adjust the table so the spiral is visible from the side and adjust the camera. Adjust the Z value for the HDRI to the position you like. Next, let's set up the materials. I'll use metal for the legs. This one looks wrong, I'll use a lighter one. I'll use Smart UV Project for the legs. A dark plastic for the catcher and for the base. Orange metal for the marble, and a glass material for the spiral. Now let's check that all normals are pointing to the right direction. The table material uses a displacement, and the shader setup looks like this. As you can see, I've added a texture for the reflections and mixed it with add mode. You can adjust the amount of reflections easily this way. I will render at 100 samples, 10 bounces for everything, except volume. Set the output path for the render folder, and a resolution of 1200 by 1200. Next, let's create a camera movement and shake. Add a keyframe on the first frame for the camera. Move a bit on the timeline to the first marble jump and adjust camera position. Add a new keyframe. Adjust position again later down the timeline and add another keyframe. Now copy the first keyframe to the end. This way camera finishes in the same spot. And add one more keyframe to the camera movement. Now, let's change the camera settings a bit. Add a depth of field, focus it on the spiral, and adjust the f-stops for the background. Add a Shackify keyframe. It's a free add-in that will add a camera shake. It will start at frame 5 with 0 shake, and on frame 25 will increase to 0.15. Will end at the same value and decrease to 0. It's a small effect, but adds to realism quite a bit. That's it, you can now render the animation. Hope this helped someone. Let me know in the comments.